Hello everyone and welcome to tutorial number 54 in a series of video tutorials for Java programming. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button and click on the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload on my channel. So in the last tutorial I discussed about generic constructors, bounded types, wildcard arguments. So if you're interested in learning these concepts, you can go and watch the previous tutorial number 53. So in this tutorial I am going to continue the concept of generics, and mostly in this tutorial I will be finishing off the concept of generics completely. Okay, then after this we will be starting the next concept, that is string, I think. So let's get started with this tutorial right away. So first thing which we'll be discussing in this particular tutorial is going to be generics and inheritance. Okay, so we already know that what is the concept of inheritance. Inheritance is like when one class it is acquiring the properties or the features of another class. Like for example, this tutorial class is extending from the example class here. Okay, but it is not visible here. So I am going to open this project explorer, and here I am going to go to that particular class, which is example class, example class. Okay, so it is extending from this particular class. That means this particular method display, it will be visible over here, but unfortunately this method is non-static in nature. So because of this reason I need to create the object of tutorial, and then I can access this display method. And if you look at this particular class tutorial, there is no method named display here. Okay, it is acquiring the property, this particular method it is acquiring from the example class only. Okay, so we already know that, and we have already discussed this in enough detail in the previous tutorials. Sorry about that for the not responding. I am sorry about that, but we have already discussed this particular thing in the previous tutorials. Okay, so I don't think we need to discuss it once again. So in this particular tutorial what we are going to do is we are going to simply discuss the concept of generics and inheritance. Okay, so here when I talk about the concept of generic inheritance, I am talking about when a generic class it is inheriting a non-generic class. Like for example, this is a generic class, we already know that. Okay, this is a generic class and it is implementing or inheriting a non-generic class. This tutorial it is a non-generic class. All right. Okay, but I don't want to inherit from tutorial because I don't want to acquire the main method over there. I want to inherit from the example class. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to extend from example. Okay, sorry, wait a minute, I made a mistake there. Sorry, I put example extends example, that is ridiculous. Okay, so generic T, it is going to extend from example. Okay, so what I'm doing here, this particular class generic T, it is a generic class and it is extending from an example class. Okay, it is extending from this particular non-generic class. Okay, so what does this mean? This simply means that this particular generic class, now if you look at this source code of this particular class, it does not have the display method over here. But because of this inheritance, now if I create the object of this generic class here, like for example let us say I create a object of the generic class here, generic integer. Okay, gen equals to new generic. Okay, so now this is the object. Okay, I need to provide some value here, 14. I'm providing a value 14 here. Okay, so now this is the object of this generic class. Okay, so gn, this is the reference, and I have assigned the object new generic. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to call the display method, and you can see very well here that it is calling the display method because this particular class it is extending from the example class. This generic class, it is a generic class obviously, and it is extending from a non-generic class which is known as example, and because of this reason it is able to access the display method. Okay, if I remove this extends example, then it is going to give an error, it is not going to work. Okay, so this is the concept of a generic class extending a non-generic class. Okay, So now next thing which we have is a generic class inheriting a generic class. Now this concept is very easy to understand. Okay, so now I have only one generic class in my project, so I'm going to create another generic class. Okay, so let us say I'm creating another generic class. What should I name it as? Let us name it as let us say toot. Okay, let us name it as toot only. Then after this I'm going to extend from generic class generic t. Now one thing you need to remember here is that now it is giving an error here because the reason being this particular class, it does not have any default constructor. Okay, I already told you a lot of times, whenever you define a particular constructor here, okay, this is a parameterized constructor, then the compiler, it is going to delete its own version of the default constructor. So so here if you want, you can remove this particular thing. Okay, you can remove this thing. Okay, if you remove this thing, then mostly the error will go away. Okay, so that is why it was giving an error over there. Okay, because right now we don't need the parameterized constructor, and even if you remove this thing, then also the error is not going to come in any case. Okay, because compiler, it is going to define its own version of default constructor. Okay, so you always need to remember one thing. I already discussed this in detail when I talked about the concept of constructors. If you have defined a default constructor or not, that doesn't matter. Okay, if you are not define any constructor, then the compiler, it is going to define its own version of default constructor. But however, if you have defined a parameterized constructor, then the compiler, it is going to remove its own version of the default constructor. Okay, so this thing I have discussed it in detail already when I discussed about the concept of the constructors. So I think this will be clear to you. Now this particular class tutorial, okay, toot, it is extending from generic class. Okay, so this toot, it is also a generic class, and this particular class generic, it is also a generic class only. Okay, so what does this mean? This toot, since it is extending from generic class, it is going to extend this set t method. It is going to acquire the get t method. It is going to get access to same average as well. So let's try this method out. Let us try this method out. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove these 2 lines of code. Then after that, I'm going to create the object of toot. Okay, toot, let us say integer once again. Okay, toot equals to new toot. All right. So now, since this particular class, it has a default constructor, you don't need to specify any value here. Okay, now after this, what am I supposed to do? I'm going to simply call this average method. Okay, now remember, this average method is not defined in the toot. Okay, it is acquiring all the properties from the generic class only. Okay, so in much the same manner, this set t method also is working in the same way. Okay, I can write set t method also here. Set t, I can write 25 or something. Then similarly, I can call the get t method also. Okay, so all of these methods, remember, all of these methods are defined in the generic class. Okay, but because this particular class, it is inheriting from the generic class, because of this reason, it is able to access all the methods which are defined in this particular class. All right, in much the same manner, you can access the same average method as well. Okay, that is also possible. Okay, that is also perfectly valid, but here you need to provide a parameter. Okay, so I'm not going to provide the parameter over here. So you can access all the methods here, but you need to remember that you cannot access private methods. Okay, so this method is not going to be accessible from the main method. Okay, so you cannot do this toot dot method. It is not going to work. Okay, so it is going to give an error. It has private access in tutorial.generic, even though it is going to inherit this particular method. It is not able to call this method. Okay, so that is all about the concept of a generic class inheriting another generic class. And another concept is a non-generic class can inherit a generic class as well. Okay, so for example, if I remove this particular t, okay, if you already know this particular concept, I already discussed what is going to happen if you remove this t, then this t is not valid. This t, it is going to give an error. Okay, I already discussed this particular thing earlier when I was discussing this generic class. This generic class, it was implementing a generic version of this particular interface. Okay, so it is obviously going to give an error. So what is the turnaround? What is the way out? You need to write integer here, or you need to I should say, in other words, you need to specify here what exactly the t is going to get replaced with. Okay, you can write integer here, you can write string here. Okay, it is completely up to you, but you need to specify what exactly the t is going to get replaced with. All right, then after this you can write character also here, you can write boolean also here. It is completely up to you. Okay, so right now I am going to go with boolean. Okay, so now what I am going to do, I am going to remove this particular lines of code, and I am going to explain how the non-generic class is going to inherit a generic class. Now remember one thing, this tut, it is a non-generic class, but it is implementing, or I should say it is extending from a generic class. Okay, so right now I want to create the object of this non-generic class. Tut equals to new tut. Okay, it is very easy to do that. Then tut dot set t. Okay, I am going to write true here. Now how am I able to write true here? The reason is because it is extending from generic boolean. Okay, if I replace this boolean with integer, then it is not going to work. It is not going to work. Okay, I need to specify here, instead of true, I need to write 25 here. Okay, so this is how the concept of inheritance is working. If I'm writing boolean here, then I need to specify a boolean value in set t. Okay, if I'm specifying a integer value here, generic integer, then I need to specify integer value over here. In much the same manner, if I, instead of integer, let us say I'm writing double, or let us say I'm writing character. Okay, then what am I supposed to do? I think you would have guessed it by now. You need to write a here. Okay, in much the same manner, if I write let us say string, okay, then I need to remove this single quotes and I need to use double quotes. Okay, so much the same manner you can access this get t method also. Okay, you can access the average method also, and in much the same manner you can access the other methods like display method also you can access. Okay, remember this display method, it is getting it from example. Okay, how exactly it is able to access this tut, it is extending from generic, and this generic, it is extending from example. So indirectly this class tut, it is extending from example. So because of this reason, even this display method is also going to work. Okay, so that is how the concept of a non-generic class is going to work. Okay, non-generic class inheriting a generic class is going to work. All right, so another concept is there, but obviously like non-generic class is inheriting a non-generic class, but I think we don't need to discuss that. This particular class tutorial, it is a non-generic class and it is already extending from a non-generic class example. Okay, so that is why I'm not discussing that here. Okay, that is a normal inheritance, I should say. So these are the three cases of generic inheritance. In generic inheritance, we only have three cases. Okay, generic class inheriting from non-generic class. Okay, generic class inheriting from a generic class, and non-generic class inheriting from a generic class. And once again, I'm repeating here, you need to mandatorily write what the t is going to get replaced with. If you write t here, then the compiler is going to give an error. It is going to throw an error. Okay, so you are not supposed to write t here. It is not going to work. Please keep that in mind. You need to write string here. Okay, or you need to write exactly what the t is going to get replaced with. Okay, so now that we have discussed this particular concept fully. Okay, then after this I'm going to talk about ambiguity. Okay, so you will be wondering what exactly is ambiguity. So we have already discussed the concept of method overloading. Okay, I hope you remember what exactly method overloading is. Okay, so once again I'm going to very shortly repeat the concept of method overloading. Method overloading means like, like for example, we have this class tutorial. Okay, so here I'm going to discuss, first of all I'm going to let us say define a method. Okay, so I'm going to call it as let us say yeah, let us say sum. Okay, I want to calculate the sum of numbers, let us say. Okay, so this is the first number, this is the second number. Obviously you should remember that if you want to calculate a sum, there should be a minimum of two numbers, and there can be maximum of anything. Maximum number can be anything. Okay, so this particular method, it is going to calculate the sum of two numbers, and this particular method, okay, it is going to calculate the calculate the sum of three numbers. Okay, so what does this mean? This is exactly what method overloading is. Method overloading means the function name has to be the same, okay, but the number of parameters has to be either the number of parameters has to be different, or what you can do, you can write float here. Okay, you can write float here and you can write float here, and then also it is going to work. I already discussed this in enough detail when I discussed the concept of method overloading. Okay, even though the number of parameters is the same, even then it is going to work, because the return type of the parameters are different. Okay, it is not going to work if you write int here. Okay, so this is what a method overloading is all about. Now you will be wondering how it is going to create ambiguity, so let's discuss that. Okay, now first of all we have this generic method. So this particular generic method, it is accepting exactly one type of parameter present here. Okay, so the type parameter, name of the type parameter is t. But what if I am going to write two type parameters? So what is going to happen if I write two type parameters here? Okay, so let us see what exactly the problem is going to be. Okay, as soon as I write two parameters, first error is appearing here, but this is not what I was talking about. Okay, I'm going to remove that, and I think that error will get that error will vanish, I think. Yeah. Okay, I was not talking about the error which is going to come here. Okay, this is not the ambiguity which I was talking about. I was talking about ambiguity in method overloading. So let's discuss about that. As I already told you, method overloading is nothing but the method defined with the same name, but either it has different number of parameters, okay, or it has same number of parameters but different data type. Like here I am providing int, and here I am providing float. So what the concept will come to your mind is that I am going to create another method. Okay, I am going to overload this particular method set t. Okay, I am going to overload this particular method set t, and I am going to write, okay, I am going to write, let us say, private u, and I'm going to write this dot u equals to u. Now already you would have seen that this particular thing is not working. Why it is not working? The reason is because of ambiguity. Okay, set t, it is clashing with set t u. Both methods have same erasure. Okay, so don't worry about the concept of erasure. It is a very minor concept. We will be looking into it later on. Okay, so what the compiler is saying is that it is a kind of ambiguity. Okay, so once again I'm going to return to this particular the main method, I should say main class, okay, tutorial class. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create an object of this generic class, okay, and I'm going to put t as string and u also as string. Okay, I'm going to write generic string. Okay, so then gen equals to new generic. After this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call gen dot set t, and I'm going to write, let us say, something like this. Now as soon as I write this, it is going to see ambiguous method call. That is exactly what I was talking about, ambiguity, method overloading. Now why it is giving an ambiguous method call? The reason is extremely very simple. Okay, the reason is because here t is getting replaced with string, here also u is getting replaced with string. So that means here the t got replaced with string, and here also u got replaced with string. And now you will understand what exactly the problem is. Okay, it is it is similar to writing this particular thing, public void sum int num1, okay, int num1 int num2, and once again I'm repeating the same method here. Okay, so that is the reason why it is giving the ambiguous error. Okay, so that is the reason. Now if I try to call this particular method, and let us say I'm making both of this method as static, let us say I'm making both of this method as static. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to call the sum 2 3. It is going to give an ambiguous error only. Because it is, it is particular method call, it is matching with this method definition, it is matching with this method definition as well. So that is the ambiguity. Here I am writing T as string, here also I am writing U as string. So that is why the error is coming into the picture. So what is the other way around? Or how am I going to solve this problem? The way is actually very simple. Okay, if you are using different type parameters, then please remember that you should not overload the methods. You should, instead of set t, you can write set u here, and right away the problem vanished. So that is the workaround, or that is the way in which this problem can be resolved. All right, so that was about ambiguity in method overloading, and you can see here that the error has now completely vanished. Okay, so before completing this tutorial, I want to completely finish off the concept of generics. So one last concept is left in generics, and that is I'm going to talk about restrictions. Okay, so this is going to be the last topic which I'm going to talk about in this particular tutorial. And as soon as after we finish this particular concept, then this generic chapter will get completely finished. So let us talk about instantiating type parameters. Okay, so now what do we have here? Okay, so once again I'm reverting this to a single type parameter. Now what is exactly is instantiating type parameter? If I'm talking about instantiating type parameter, then I mean I'm writing here, instead of this dot t equals t, I'm writing t equals to new t. This is not allowed. You need to understand why this is not allowed. Okay, now here the t, it is not having any upper bound or any lower bound, obviously. Okay, so this t can be anything. Please keep that in mind. This t can be anything. This t can be it can be interface also. Okay, this t can be anything. I can write generic let us say gen interface. Okay, I can write that also inside it. It is not going to give any errors whatsoever, I think. Raw use of gen interface. Okay, let me write let us say I'm going to write custom. Okay, you can write even an interface here. This t can be replaced even by interfaces also. Okay, so you can write anything here. That is the reason why the compiler doesn't understand that what this t is going to get replaced with. Now please keep this in mind. Here I am replacing t with custom. Okay, so is this thing valid? Do you think this thing is valid? Custom equals new custom. It is not valid. Obviously this thing is not at all valid. Okay, I already discussed this particular thing. Custom interface cannot be instantiated. That is the reason why this is giving an error. Type parameter cannot be instantiated directly. Obviously it cannot be instantiated directly. I can replace this t with interfaces. I can replace this t with enums as well. Okay, so let's try that out. Generic day gen, and you cannot instantiate generics also. You cannot instantiate, I should say, enums. I think you know this concept as well. We already discussed it. So that is the reason why this particular thing doesn't work. Okay, because this doesn't, in any case, even if this has upper parameters, then also it is not going to work. Okay, even then also this thing is not going to work. Okay, this t, it cannot be instantiated directly in any case. So that is the thing which you need to keep in mind. Okay, you cannot instantiate t directly, because here the t can be anything. It can be interface, it can be a enum, it can be a class, and obviously you cannot instantiate an interface, you cannot instantiate an enum, but the compiler doesn't know what exactly the t is going to get replaced with. So that is the reason why the compiler is complaining that you cannot instantiate t directly. Okay, so I hope this concept is clear. Then after that I'm going to talk about static type parameter. Okay, so if I talk about a static type parameter, what I'm talking about here is, instead of this is an instance t, this particular t, it is an instance variable. So what happens if I try to make it static? It is not going to work. Okay, so you cannot make this particular thing as static. If you're trying to declare the reference of a type parameter, here I am, this t, it is a reference of a type parameter, then you cannot make this as static. In much the same manner, you cannot use this t inside a static method. Public static void, let us say I'm writing something like change t, okay, tt, then also it is not going to work. Okay, so I cannot use this particular method. So I cannot write this dot, obviously I cannot use this, this is not allowed in any case. Okay, so that is the reason why you cannot make reference of, you cannot make static references of type parameters. Okay, so this tt, it is a reference of a type parameter, but this cannot be static. If this is non-static, then it will work perfectly fine, but as soon as you make it static, it is going to give an error. So the concept, what the concept says is, you cannot define static references of a type parameter. Okay, so that is the first thing. Okay, and in much the same manner, here also you cannot access key inside a static method. Okay, if you make it non-static, then it is going to work, but if you make it static, then it is not going to work. Okay, so that is another thing which we need to keep in mind. Okay, now the reason why this particular thing is not going to work perhaps is like, here you need to define the object of this generic class. Obviously you cannot use this. Okay, you cannot use this inside a static method. I think you already know that by now. Okay, you need to create object of this generic class, like let us say generic integer. Okay, generic integer gen. Then after that you need to write this is equals to new generic t. Then after that you need to write gen dot t equals to t. And even this is also giving an this is also giving an error, but that is because this thing is not initialized. New generic. And even then also this is giving an error only. Okay, because this is an integer and this is t, so type compatibility error. Okay, so please keep this in mind. That is the reason why compiler doesn't allow the because here inside a static method you cannot use this keyword, right? So you need to definitely create object of generic class, and you cannot I think you cannot declare it like this. You cannot use t here. Can you use t here? Yes, you can use t here, but it is not going to work. It is going to give an error again. Okay, so I think this concept is clear. Then after this we have the concept of array of t. We cannot create array of t. Okay, so what do I mean by that? If I replace this t with this t, okay, ignore sorry, so sorry, okay, so please ignore this written t for now. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I am talking about this particular thing, t equals to new t n. This particular thing is not valid. Once again the answer is the same. Why this is not valid? This t can be an interface, this t can be an enum, this t can be a class, this t can be anything. Okay, so this particular statement is not valid. In much the same manner, here inside this public static void method, you cannot declare type specific generic references. So what do I mean by that? For example, generic integer gen. Okay, I'm going to create an array here. Okay, then gen equals to new generic integer. Then here I'm going to write 10. This is not allowed. Okay, this thing is not allowed. Okay, so here it is giving error generic array creation. You cannot this particular statement is not allowed. You cannot create a generic array like this. Okay, so that is another restriction which is present for creating a generic array. Then another restriction is a generic class, it cannot extend from the throwable class. So what do I mean by that? Instead of example, this particular class generic, it is a generic class obviously. Now instead of example, if I try to extend it from throwable, it is not going to work. Okay, it is going to give an error. Generic class, it may not extend java.lang.throwable. Okay, so sorry about this length of this tutorial, guys. I think it has went on for more than half an hour now. So but we have completely finished the concept of generics. Okay, I am sorry, I have to hurry a little bit in the end. Okay, so but in any case, if you don't understand any concept, then don't forget to post in the comment section below. Okay, and that's all I'm going to talk about in this particular tutorial. And if you liked this particular tutorial, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And yeah, I will see you in the next tutorial. So till then, bye.